Beyond the Dome. Chapter 5, New Horizons. 6 months after the confrontation that had changed everything, Ash stood on an observation platform overlooking the new settlement taking shape in the valley between Nexus Point and Eden 9's territory. Unlike either the Dome's sterile perfection or the Coalition's rugged adaptation to wasteland conditions, this community represented something different. A deliberate integration of both approaches, designed as a transition space where Dome citizens could experience controlled adaptation while maintaining connection to their former lives. Transition Outpost Alpha, Elias said, joining him at the railing. Not the most inspired name, but I suppose function outweighs poetry in this case. It serves its purpose, Ash replied, watching as both Dome technicians and Coalition specialists collaborated on environmental systems that combined Dome protection technologies with adaptation support structures. The first physical bridge between isolated human populations in 50 years. In the months since adaptation information had begun penetrating Dome information barriers, much had changed. Initial responses from Dome leadership had ranged from denial to threats of military action. But reality had ultimately forced adaptation of a different kind. Strategic repositioning to maintain governance relevance in the face of irrefutable evidence that human life was possible outside controlled environments. Eden 9, under Director Kane's surprisingly pragmatic leadership, had been among the first domes to transition from containment to controlled engagement. Whether from genuine recognition of changing circumstances or simply tactical awareness that suppression had become untenable, Kane had established formal communication protocols with Coalition leadership and initiated what Dome information systems carefully characterized as Environmental Adaptation Research Cooperation. The observation platform where they stood represented one outcome of that cooperation, a monitoring station overseeing the construction of a transitional community where Dome citizens could begin the adaptation process without immediately severing connections to their former lives. Similar outposts were being established near other domes across the continent, creating graduated transition zones between completely controlled and fully adapted environments. "How's the latest group adjusting?" Ash asked, nodding toward a section of the outpost where recent Dome emigrants received adaptation support under combined Dome Coalition medical supervision. "Better than expected," Elias replied, his scientific training having evolved into a specialization in adaptation transition protocols. "The psychological preparation programs we developed are showing good results. Initial adaptation anxiety responses are down 30% compared to the first groups." Preparing Dome citizens psychologically for adaptation possibilities had proven as challenging as the biological modifications themselves. Generations raised to believe the external environment was uniformly lethal struggled to integrate evidence of adaptation viability without traumatic worldview disruption. Ash, Elias, and Riya had found unexpected purpose developing transition frameworks that addressed both physiological and psychological aspects of the journey between worlds. "And the Eden 9 response to the latest information release?" Ash inquired, referring to the carefully sequenced adaptation revelations being introduced to Dome populations through controlled channels. "Mixed, as expected," Elias acknowledged. "Scientific and medical sectors are integrating the information effectively, even enthusiastically in some cases. Social stability metrics show increased stress in residential sectors, but within manageable parameters. The education division is struggling most with curriculum revisions. The challenge of updating Dome educational systems to incorporate adaptation possibilities without undermining confidence in Dome structures represented one of the more complex aspects of the transition. Children raised on absolute certainties about external lethality needed carefully calibrated introduction to alternatives that expanded rather than shattered their understanding of human possibilities. "Riya's team is finalizing new educational frameworks this week," Ash noted, incorporating both Dome survival history and adaptation development as complementary rather than contradictory human achievements. Riya had found her calling in this aspect of the transition, developing communication structures that bridge Dome and Coalition knowledge systems, with particular focus on educational approaches that honored both human paths while opening possibilities for their integration. As they continued observing the outpost's activities, Dr. Lynn Park approached their position, her adapted features now familiar after months of collaboration. As the Coalition's chief adaptation researcher, she had formed an effective, if sometimes contentious, partnership with Eden 9's medical division, integrating dome technology with Coalition adaptation protocols to create more effective transition procedures. "Your physiological assessments are ready," she informed them without preamble, her scientific directness unchanged by the diplomatic complexities surrounding her work. "Both of you show promising markers for advanced adaptation protocols if you decide to proceed." The question of personal adaptation remained complex for the former harvesters. While they had committed to facilitating transition between dome and adapted communities, their own biological adaptation status represented both practical and symbolic considerations. Ash and Elias had undergone preliminary adaptation support, pharmaceutical enhancements to their detoxification pathways and limited genetic modifications allowing extended wasteland exposure without full harvester protection, but had not yet committed to complete adaptation procedures. "And the new protocol you've been developing with Eden 9's medical division?" Elias asked, his scientific curiosity evident. "The targeted genetic modification approach?" "Showing excellent results in preliminary testing," Dr. Park confirmed. "By combining Eden 9's precision genetic technologies with our generational adaptation data, we've developed modification protocols that achieve in one generation what originally required 3. 91% success rate with minimal side effects." The collaboration between Dome biotechnology and Coalition adaptation experience represented one of the more productive outcomes of the forced revelation. Eden 9's advanced medical technologies, developed for controlled Dome applications, provided precision tools that Coalition researchers had lacked, while generations of adaptation data offered insights Dome science had never been allowed to explore. "The integrated medical facility at the outpost will begin offering the new protocols next month," Dr. Park continued. "Your participation would provide valuable data on adaptation responses in Dome citizens with harvester conditioning. Administrator Chen believes your visible adaptation would also serve strategic purposes in the ongoing transition." The suggestion wasn't subtle. Central Coalition Command clearly believed former harvesters undergoing successful adaptation would provide powerful symbolic evidence for hesitant Dome citizens considering their own transition options. While not pressuring them directly, the leadership structures of both communities had made their preferences increasingly clear. "We'll review the complete assessment data," Ash responded diplomatically. "It's not a decision to make without full consideration of the implications." Dr. Park nodded, respecting their caution while clearly hoping for eventual participation. "The assessment files have been transferred to your secure system. Dr. Reeves has added her personal notes regarding your specific adaptation profiles." As she departed to continue her rounds of the outpost's medical facilities, Ash and Elias returned to monitoring the settlement's development. The integration of Dome and Coalition technologies created interesting hybrid approaches. Environmental filtration systems that combined Dome purification standards with Coalition adaptation support. Energy generation that paired Dome efficiency with Coalition durability. Agricultural facilities that utilize Dome cultivation precision within Coalition-developed toxin-resistant frameworks. "It's working better than I expected," Elias admitted, gesturing toward the collaborative activities below. "When we first arrived at Nexus Point, the gulf between Dome and adapted perspectives seemed unbridgeable. Now look at them, working together on systems neither could have developed independently." The observation carried weight beyond technological collaboration. Human communities that had evolved in isolation for generations. One through controlled environments and carefully managed development. The other through biological adaptation and resilience in harsh conditions, were cautiously reconnecting, sharing knowledge and perspectives that complemented rather than threatened each other's core values. "Necessity drives adaptation," Ash quoted the Coalition proverb that had become something of a personal mantra during the transition period. Both sides recognized continued isolation offered less potential than careful integration. Their conversation was interrupted by a notification from the outpost's communication system. "Incoming transport from Eden 9, diplomatic delegation requesting transition briefing." Ash checked the schedule on his secure tablet. That would be the Governance Council representatives, their quarterly assessment of transition progress. He glanced at Elias. Ready to present our latest data? Elias nodded, though his expression betrayed mild anxiety. Formal presentations to Eden 9's leadership remained stressful experiences for the former harvesters, despite months of diplomatic interaction. The subtle power dynamics and unspoken judgments carried complex psychological weight for those who had chosen to leave Dome Authority structures. They descended from the observation platform toward the outpost's central administrative facility, where combined Dome Coalition governance teams managed the transition settlement. Throughout the complex, the integration of different human approaches was visible in both technology and personnel. Dome citizens in various stages of adaptation working alongside Coalition specialists with different levels of environmental modification. In the main conference area, they found Riya already preparing for the delegation's arrival, her communication expertise having evolved into a diplomatic specialization that made her invaluable for intercommunity relations. Her own adaptation status mirrored theirs, preliminary modifications allowing extended wasteland exposure without complete harvester protection, but not yet the full genetic integration that would permanently transform her biology. The Council's sending Director Kane personally, she informed them as they joined her preparation, along with representatives from education, medical, and resource divisions. Apparently, our latest transition metrics have generated significant interest in Eden 9's leadership circles. The arrival of a high-level delegation suggested both the importance Eden 9 placed on the transition process and their continued concern about maintaining influence as adaptation knowledge spread throughout Dome populations. Director Kane, surprisingly adaptable himself given his previous investment in information containment, had emerged as a pragmatic bridge between Dome governance traditions and the new reality of human existence beyond controlled environments. When the Eden 9 transport arrived 30 minutes later, the delegation that emerged represented the Dome's highest authority short of the Governance Council itself. Director Kane led personally, accompanied by division leaders whose formal attire and precise movements contrasted sharply with the more practical, flexible approach of Coalition personnel. Director, Ash greeted formally as the delegation entered the conference facility. Welcome to Transition Outpost Alpha. Kane acknowledged him with professional neutrality, neither the hostility of their confrontation 6 months prior nor the warmth of genuine alliance, but the measured respect of pragmatic cooperation between former adversaries. Harvester Tanner, he responded, using Ash's former title despite its technical inaccuracy now, perhaps from habit, perhaps as subtle reminder of former allegiances. Your transition metrics report indicated accelerating adaptation acceptance among Eden 9's scientific sectors. The Council requested direct verification of these findings given their potential implications for resource allocation planning. The diplomatic phrasing masked the fundamental concern. Dome governance structures worried about potential population exodus as adaptation knowledge spread, particularly among specialized personnel whose skills were essential for Dome maintenance. The transition metrics Ash's team had been monitoring showed increasing interest in adaptation possibilities among precisely the Dome citizens whose departure would most impact Dome functionality. We've prepared comprehensive data presentations, Ash assured him, gesturing toward the conference area where visualization systems displayed the latest statistics, including both quantitative adaptation interest metrics and qualitative assessment of motivational factors. The delegation seated themselves with Dome precision, data tablets aligned at exact angles before them, posture reflecting the controlled environment that had shaped their development. Ash noted that none had opted for even preliminary adaptation modifications despite regular outpost visits, maintaining full environmental protection whenever outside Dome environments, a visible statement about their continued Dome identification despite engaging with adaptation realities. The presentation proceeded methodically, with Ash, Elias, and Riya providing detailed analysis of transition patterns emerging among Dome populations. Scientific and medical personnel showed highest adaptation interest, followed by resource acquisition specialists, particularly harvesters with wasteland experience, while governance and social stability sectors demonstrated greatest resistance. Predictable alignments that reflected professional exposure to external realities versus investment in Dome control structures. Throughout, Director Kane and his team asked precise, technical questions focused primarily on stability metrics. Assessments of how adaptation knowledge was affecting Dome social cohesion, resource allocation systems, and governance acceptance. Their concerns, while framed in neutral administrative language, consistently returned to the fundamental question: could Dome societies maintain functional continuity as adaptation possibilities became widely understood among their populations? Your data suggests approximately 17% of Eden 9's adult population expresses interest in potential adaptation, the Resource Division representative noted, highlighting figures from the presentation, with highest percentages among specialized technical personnel. How would you assess the impact on Dome functionality if these interest metrics converted to actual transition decisions? The question cut to the heart of Dome leadership concerns. Not just philosophical resistance to adaptation truth, but practical considerations about maintaining essential Dome systems if significant portions of their specialized workforce chose to leave. Our analysis indicates adaptation interest doesn't necessarily translate to immediate Dome departure, Riya explained, displaying additional data visualizations. Many express desire for gradual transition through outpost residency while maintaining Dome responsibilities. Others prefer receiving adaptation information while choosing to remain permanently in Dome environments. And our transition support frameworks are specifically designed to manage adaptation pacing to prevent critical system disruption, Elias added, highlighting the protocols they developed precisely to address these concerns. The goal has never been Dome abandonment, but expanded human options with responsible implementation. This represented the core message they had been carefully cultivating throughout the transition process. Adaptation possibilities complemented rather than threatened Dome existence, offering expanded human options without requiring abandonment of established structures. Some humans would prefer continued Dome residence, even with adaptation possibilities. Others would choose external adaptation. Many would navigate between these options through graduated transition. As the presentation concluded, Director Kane's assessment remained characteristically measured. Your transition frameworks demonstrate thoughtful consideration of stability requirements, he acknowledged, the closest he typically came to direct approval. The Council will incorporate this data into our resource planning models for the coming quarters. With formal business concluded, the delegation prepared to tour the outpost's facilities, particularly the Adaptation Medical Center, where Dome and Coalition technologies were being integrated to develop more effective transition protocols. As the division representatives moved ahead with facility staff, Director Kane held back, gesturing for Ash to remain behind for a more private conversation. Your personal adaptation status remains preliminary, he observed once others had moved beyond easy hearing distance. Despite serving as transition facilitator for 6 months, may I ask why? The direct question surprised Ash, who had expected Kane to maintain the professional distance that had characterized their interactions since the confrontation. Complex considerations, he replied carefully. Practical, psychological, symbolic. Complete biological adaptation represents an irreversible transformation. I've chosen to proceed gradually while continuing to evaluate implications. Kane studied him with unexpected perceptiveness. Maintaining liminality serves strategic purposes, he observed. Neither fully Dome nor fully adapted positions you as bridge between communities. I recognize the tactical value of that position during transition. The assessment demonstrated greater insight than Ash had anticipated from the Dome director. Kane had clearly been observing and analyzing the former Harvester's choices with the same strategic mindset he applied to broader transition dynamics. Bridges connect but remain distinct from both shores they join, Ash acknowledged, neither confirming nor denying Kane's tactical assessment. Someone needs to understand both perspectives genuinely during this transition period. Indeed. Kane's expression remained neutral, but something in his tone suggested unexpected depth. Though I imagine permanent liminality carries its own challenges, belonging fully to neither world while serving both. The observation hit closer to Ash's private struggles than he found entirely comfortable. The months serving as transition facilitator between Dome and adapted communities had provided clear purpose, but also created unique identity challenges. no longer fully dome in perspective, yet not fully integrated into coalition biological reality either. The middle path offered unique contribution opportunities, but also unique psychological strains. Every position in this transition carries distinct challenges, Ash replied diplomatically. Dome leadership navigating changing realities while maintaining essential stability. Coalition communities integrating Dome citizens without losing adapted cultural values. Former harvesters applying Dome training to adaptation facilitation. We all serve transition from different perspectives. Kane seemed to accept this philosophical deflection, though his penetrating gaze suggested continued interest in the former harvester's personal adaptation journey. The Governance Council is considering establishing a permanent transition authority, he said instead, shifting to more formal ground. A specialized division focused specifically on managing Dome adaptation relationships long-term rather than treating current circumstances as temporary anomaly. The information represented significant evolution in Dome leadership thinking, acknowledging adaptation reality as permanent structural consideration rather than temporary disruption to be contained or resolved. It suggested genuine integration of adaptation knowledge into Dome governance models, a critical development for sustainable coexistence. That would demonstrate meaningful commitment to integration rather than segregation moving forward, Ash observed carefully. The Council would seek personnel with experience navigating both environments, Kane continued with deliberate neutrality. Individuals who understand Dome priorities while recognizing adaptation realities. Former harvesters with transition facilitation experience would be logical candidates for leadership roles. The implication hung in the air between them, a potential path back into Dome governance structures for the former harvesters, though in radically transformed context. No longer resource extraction specialists serving controlled environments, but transition facilitators helping bridge divided human communities from within Dome authority frameworks. An interesting development, Ash acknowledged without committing further, though effectiveness would depend on genuine authority rather than symbolic positioning. Of course, Kane agreed with unexpected directness. Visible success in transition management has become politically valuable within Dome governance circles. Those who demonstrate practical effectiveness navigating these new realities find unexpected influence in council deliberations. The frank acknowledgement of political realities suggested Kane himself had gained rather than lost influence through his pragmatic adaptation to changing circumstances, leveraging his direct engagement with coalition structures to position himself as essential navigator of Dome adaptation relations moving forward. Their conversation was interrupted as the touring delegation returned, having completed their inspection of the outpost's integrated facilities. The division representatives appeared cautiously impressed by the technological collaboration evident throughout the settlement, though their formal Dome demeanor made specific reactions difficult to assess precisely. The medical integration is particularly noteworthy, the medical division representative commented as they rejoined the group. Coalition adaptation data combined with Dome genetic precision offers potential applications beyond transition support. Certain modified detoxification pathways might address persistent health challenges even within Dome environments. It represented another evolutionary development in the transition process. Dome specialists beginning to recognize adaptation technologies as valuable for their own purposes rather than merely external alternatives to Dome existence. The boundaries between human approaches were blurring as each recognized potential benefits in the other's developed capabilities. As the Eden 9 delegation prepared to depart, Director Kane addressed Ash, Elias, and Riya with formal professionalism. Your transition facilitation efforts continue to demonstrate value, he stated. The Council will review your latest metrics and facility developments in their next adaptive planning session. Expect communication regarding the Transition Authority initiative within the month. After their departure, the three former harvesters gathered in their shared workspace within the outpost's administrative center, a space that reflected their liminal status through its integration of Dome organization principles and coalition adaptive flexibility. The walls displayed constantly updating visualizations of transition metrics from all 12 remaining domes, monitoring adaptation knowledge, penetration, and response patterns across the full spectrum of human communities. A transition authority, Elias mused, processing the information Ash had shared from his conversation with Kane. permanent institutional recognition of adaptation reality rather than emergency response positioning. That's significant evolution in dome governance thinking, and potentially significant opportunity for our continuing work, Riya added, her diplomatic mind immediately assessing strategic implications. Formal authority within dome structures while maintaining coalition relationships would expand our transition facilitation capabilities substantially. Ash moved to the visualization wall, studying the spreading patterns of adaptation knowledge through dome populations, different rates in different communities, varied response patterns reflecting distinct dome cultures, but all showing progressive integration rather than catastrophic disruption. The careful transition frameworks they had helped develop were functioning effectively, allowing humans separated for generations to begin reconnecting without destroying either community's essential stability. We would need to consider symbolic implications carefully, he observed. Returning to dome governance structures, even transformed ones, carries meaning for both communities. Coalition leadership might perceive reduced neutrality in our transition positioning, or recognize strategic value in having trusted transition facilitators within dome authority frameworks, Riya countered. Administrator Chen has consistently emphasized long-term integration over separation, having former harvesters who understand adaptation realities helping shape dome transition policies serves that objective. The discussion continued as they weighed potential paths forward, remaining in their current liminal positions between communities, accepting formal roles within the proposed Dome Transition Authority, or potentially transitioning fully to coalition structures with complete biological adaptation. Each option offered different strategic contributions to the ongoing human reconnection, different personal implications for their evolving identities. Their conversation was interrupted by a notification from the outpost's communication system, an incoming transmission from Central Coalition Command requesting video conference with all three former harvesters. The timing immediately following Eden 9's delegation visit seemed unlikely to be coincidental. Administrator Chen's image appeared on their communication display, her adapted features now familiar after months of regular consultation. I understand Eden 9's governance representatives have visited the outpost today, she began without preamble, her directness matching Kane's in its own way. Our monitoring systems detected their delegation composition and duration. High-level engagement suggests significant developments in dome transition positioning. The casual reference to coalition monitoring of dome activities demonstrated the continued strategic awareness beneath the developing cooperation, both communities maintaining vigilance while cautiously engaging with former adversaries. Director Kane mentioned a potential transition authority being established within Eden 9's governance structure, Ash confirmed, recognizing the futility of information compartmentalization when both communities maintain sophisticated intelligence capabilities. A permanent division focused on managing dome adaptation relationships rather than temporary response frameworks. Consistent with our assessment of evolving dome strategy, Chen acknowledged. Their leadership has recognized containment failure and pivoted to controlled integration rather than resistance. Pragmatic adaptation to changing circumstances. Her choice of adaptation carried subtle irony given dome resistance to biological adaptation while demonstrating strategic adaptation to changing information realities. The double meaning wasn't lost on any of them. The development presents both opportunities and complications for our transition objectives, Chen continued. Institutional recognition of adaptation reality within dome governance accelerates normalization, but potential co-option of transition narratives by dome authority structures creates messaging challenges. The administrators' concerns mirrored their own considerations: how to maintain authentic transition facilitation that served both communities' legitimate interests rather than becoming merely symbolic representatives of adaptation reality within dome control frameworks. Director Kane implied former harvesters might be considered for leadership roles within this new authority, Ash added, watching Chen's reaction carefully. Her expression remained measured, though subtle shifts suggested both interest and caution. Unsurprising, your liminal positioning offers strategic value to dome governance attempting to navigate unfamiliar territory. She studied them thoughtfully through the video connection. Your potential influence within dome structures would serve integration objectives if leveraged effectively. The question becomes whether Dome Authority frameworks would permit such effective leverage or merely utilize your presence symbolically. It articulated precisely the consideration they had been discussing themselves, whether formal positions within Dome transition structures would provide genuine influence or simply symbolic legitimization of Dome-controlled adaptation management. "We've made no commitments regarding potential roles," Ash assured her. "Any consideration would involve consultation with coalition leadership given the implications for broader transition objectives." Chen nodded approvingly. "The Central Command appreciates your strategic awareness. This transition period requires careful navigation of evolving power dynamics between communities." She paused briefly. "Which brings me to the second purpose of this communication. The Command has authorized offering accelerated complete adaptation protocols to all three of you, should you choose to proceed with full biological integration. The timing of the offer, immediately following information about potential Dome governance roles, carried obvious strategic implications. Complete biological adaptation would represent visible commitment to coalition identity at precisely the moment Dome structures were offering reintegration through the proposed transition authority. "The new integrated protocols developed with Eden-9's medical division?" Elias asked, his scientific interest evident despite the political complications surrounding the offer. "Yes, the combined approach has proven remarkably effective in recent trials. Dr. Reeves personally oversees the adaptation process for candidates with your specific physiological profiles." Chen's expression softened slightly. "Though I emphasize this represents opportunity rather than obligation. Your continued contribution to transition efforts remains valued regardless of personal adaptation decisions." The careful balancing of opportunity with reassurance suggested coalition leadership understood the complex identity considerations the former harvesters continued navigating, neither pressuring them toward full adaptation nor suggesting their current liminal status diminished their contribution value. After discussing coordination details for continued transition planning, the communication concluded, leaving Ash, Elias, and Riya to process the sequential offers from both governance structures, Dome roles within the proposed transition authority, coalition access to accelerated adaptation protocols. The timing suggested both communities recognized the symbolic and practical value of the former harvesters' positions in the evolving relationship between divided human populations. "They're both offering paths to greater integration from opposite directions," Riya observed with diplomatic perceptiveness. "Dome structures providing governance roles without requiring biological adaptation. Coalition offering complete biological adaptation without governance obligations. Different approaches reflecting their fundamental values. While we continue occupying the space between," Elias added, gesturing toward the transition visualization displays surrounding them. "Neither fully Dome nor fully adapted, but connecting both through frameworks that allow integration without requiring immediate transformation." Ash moved to the observation window overlooking the outpost below, where Dome and Coalition personnel continued their collaborative work developing integration systems that would allow humans from both communities to navigate between their different environments without abandoning either entirely. The settlement itself embodied the principle they had been cultivating throughout the transition process. Not binary choice between isolated alternatives, but graduated integration that preserved valuable aspects of both human approaches. "Maybe that's the most important insight from this entire process," he said finally, turning back to his teammates. "Not which side offers the correct human future, but recognizing that diversity of approach serves humanity better than enforced uniformity. The Domes preserved humanity through controlled environments when extinction threatened. Adaptation expanded human possibilities when control became limitation. Both contributed to human continuance through different means. Integration rather than elimination," Riya agreed. "Expanded choices rather than restricted ones." The philosophy had become central to their transition facilitation work, helping both communities recognize legitimate value in the other's approach while developing frameworks that allowed individual humans to choose their preferred balance between controlled security and adaptive possibility. "Which means our own choices about personal paths forward should reflect that same principle," Elias suggested. "Not uniform decisions, but individual ones based on our specific contributions and preferences." The observation opened space for more nuanced consideration than simply choosing between the offered paths. Perhaps they would make different individual choices, Elias potentially pursuing complete adaptation to further his scientific contribution to integrated medical approaches, Riya possibly accepting a role within the Dome Transition Authority to influence communication frameworks from within governance structures, Ash perhaps maintaining his current liminal status to continue bridging divided communities through transition facilitation. Different choices serving the same fundamental objective: human reintegration after generations of separation, expanded possibilities rather than enforced limitations, adaptation in all its forms: biological, social, psychological, philosophical. As night fell over the outpost, Ash remained at the observation window after his teammates had departed for their evening responsibilities. Below, the lights of the transition settlement created patterns of illumination different from either the perpetual brightness of dome environments or the strategic darkness of coalition communities. Integration of approaches rather than imposition of either standard. 6 months ago, he had been a harvester serving Eden 9 without questioning the foundational premises upon which Dome society was constructed. Discovery of adapted human communities had shattered those premises, revealing alternatives he'd been taught were impossible. The journey since had transformed not just his understanding of post-collapse human possibilities, but his conception of his own purpose within that expanded reality. The path forward remained uncertain in its specifics, but the guiding principle had crystallized through months of transition facilitation work: service to human integration rather than division, expanding choices rather than restricting them, honoring both preservation and adaptation as legitimate responses to post-collapse challenges. Whatever specific role he chose, whether within dome structures, coalition communities, or the liminal space between, that principle would guide his contribution to the continuing human journey beyond the initial trauma of environmental collapse toward whatever integrated future might eventually emerge. Not Eden restored, not the wasteland conquered, but something new. A humanity that had learned to adapt in all meanings of that transformative concept. 1 year later, Ash stood on the expanded observation platform overlooking Transition Outpost Alpha, now grown into a substantial settlement housing over 2,000 residents, representing both Dome and Coalition origins. The integration of technologies and approaches had evolved significantly, with hybrid systems that combined Dome precision with Coalition resilience, creating living environments that allowed graduated adaptation according to individual preference and capability. Elias approached along the platform. His appearance noticeably changed from a year earlier. Having chosen complete biological adaptation through the integrated protocols, his physical features now showed the subtle signs of environmental modification. Slightly textured skin offering enhanced protection against toxicity, the faint membrane over his eyes providing additional filtering capability. The transformation represented not just biological evolution, but his philosophical commitment to advancing integrated medical approaches through personal experience of the adaptation process. The new residential section is exceeding capacity projections, he reported, referring to the recently completed living quarters designed specifically for Dome citizens in early adaptation stages. We're already planning expansion for the next migration group. As the transition had progressed, Dome populations had increasingly chosen to explore adaptation possibilities, not through chaotic exodus, but through the carefully managed frameworks they had helped develop. Some committed to complete adaptation and coalition integration. Others opted for partial modification, allowing limited external activity while maintaining Dome connections. Many chose to receive adaptation information while remaining permanently in Dome environments better suited to their preferences. Diversity of choice rather than enforced uniformity had become the hallmark of successful transition. Humans selecting their preferred balance between security and possibility based on individual priorities rather than imposed limitations. How's the latest research integration progressing? Ash asked, noting the expanded medical facility where Dome and Coalition approaches continued merging into new hybrid technologies. Breakthrough developments in targeted adaptation, Elias replied with evident satisfaction. The combined protocols now achieve 80% adaptation with minimal side effects in a single treatment series. Dr. Reeves is already working on applications for individuals with specific medical vulnerabilities previously considered incompatible with external conditions. The collaborative research represented one of the most productive outcomes of human reintegration. Dome precision technologies combined with coalition adaptation experience, creating possibilities neither community could have developed in isolation. Similar integration was occurring across multiple domains: agriculture, energy generation, resource management, education. As formerly separated human approaches recognized complementary value in their different evolutionary pathways. Riya joined them on the platform, her appearance reflecting her own chosen path through the transition period. Having accepted a diplomatic role within Eden-9's newly established transition authority, she maintained her dome biological status while serving as essential communication bridge between governance structures. Her formal attire reflected her official position, though modified to incorporate practical elements adopted from coalition approaches, visual representation of her integrated perspective despite maintained dome biology. The Governance Council has approved the expanded transition curriculum, she informed them, evident satisfaction in her voice. Full integration of adaptation history and biological possibilities into dome education at all levels. No more segregated special topics positioning. Just comprehensive human development incorporating both dome and adaptation knowledge. It represented significant evolution in dome information management, moving from suppression through careful control to eventual full integration of adaptation reality into fundamental knowledge frameworks. The transition had required time and strategic management to prevent destabilization, but the resulting information integration was now proceeding more smoothly than many had anticipated. And Central Coalition Command has authorized establishing permanent diplomatic exchange with all 12 remaining domes, she continued. Official recognition protocols rather than informal coordination. Administrator Chen is personally overseeing the implementation framework. The formal diplomatic relationship between dome and adaptation governance structures marked another milestone in human reintegration. Acknowledgement that both approaches to post-collapse survival represented legitimate governance authorities with distinct territorial and population responsibilities. The emerging relationship resembled nation-state diplomacy from pre-collapse history more than the adversarial positioning that had characterized initial contact. Ash himself had maintained his unique position throughout the transition period, neither returning fully to dome structures through the transition authority nor undergoing complete biological adaptation with the coalition. Instead, he had developed an independent role as transition facilitator and strategic advisor to both governance structures, maintaining the liminal perspective that allowed him to translate effectively between different human approaches. His partial biological adaptation, sufficient to function in wasteland conditions with minimal protection but not complete genetic integration, mirrored his philosophical positioning, connected to both communities while remaining distinct enough from each to maintain objective perspective on their continuing integration challenges. The middle path had proven uniquely valuable during the critical transition period, offering insights neither fully dome nor fully adapted perspectives could provide independently. The next phase begins next month, he noted, gesturing toward construction at the outpost's perimeter. Extended range expeditions with integrated dome coalition teams, exploring adaptation possibilities in regions previously considered permanently uninhabitable. The combined exploration teams represented another evolution in human reintegration. Dome technical expertise and resource assessment capabilities paired with coalition adaptation experience and wasteland navigation skills. Together, they would investigate regions beyond either community's established territories, assessing potential for expanded human presence through integrated approaches rather than isolated efforts. Harvesting of a different kind, Elias observed with subtle humor. Knowledge and possibility rather than merely resources. The redefinition of harvesting itself symbolized the broader transformation occurring as humans reconnected after generations of separation. What had begun as resource extraction to sustain isolated dome existence had evolved into collaborative exploration seeking expanded possibilities for integrated human futures. As they continued discussing developments across the spectrum of dome coalition relations, a notification sounded on Ash's communication device. A priority message from both Eden-9's Transition Authority and Central Coalition Command. The simultaneous contact from both governance structures had become increasingly common as integration progressed. with Ash's unique positioning making him valuable coordinator for joint initiatives. The message outlined the next major transition milestone, a proposed integrated governance council comprising representatives from both Dome and coalition leadership structures. Not merging of authority, but formal cooperation framework allowing coordinated planning for human development beyond adversarial positioning. Both governance structures requested Ash's participation in designing implementation protocols given his demonstrated ability to navigate between their different approaches. As he shared the information with Elias and Riya, their conversation turned to the continuing evolution of human relationships post-collapse. What had begun with desperate survival through isolated approaches, Domes preserving through controlled environments, adaptation expanding through biological modification, was gradually transforming into integrated development incorporating strengths from both evolutionary pathways. Not what any of us imagined when we discovered that research facility a year ago, Elias reflected. The memory of their harvesting mission that had changed everything still vivid despite all that had occurred since. We were harvesting resources, Ash agreed, looking out over the integrated settlement below. We found truth instead. Difficult truth that contradicted everything we'd been taught, but truth that eventually expanded human possibilities rather than restricting them. The transition remained incomplete, with many challenges still to navigate. Some Dome citizens continued resisting adaptation reality, preferring comfortable certainties over complex possibilities. Some coalition communities maintained suspicion of Dome integration, fearing dilution of adaptation values through compromise. The psychological barriers between human populations separated for generations wouldn't disappear instantly, despite technological and biological bridges being established. Yet the fundamental direction had shifted from separation toward integration, from containment toward expansion, from controlled limitation toward adaptive possibility. Humans were reconnecting across their different evolutionary paths, recognizing complementary value in their varied approaches to post-collapse survival rather than insisting on singular correctness. As twilight settled over the transition settlement, lights illuminated the integrated community in patterns reflecting both Dome efficiency and coalition practicality. Neither approach dominating, but both contributing their strengths to shared human environment. Dome citizens and adapted coalition members moved through shared spaces, their different biologies representing not division but diversity of human response to challenging circumstances. Ash remained on the observation platform after his colleagues departed, watching the settlement below as he had so often during the transition period. His unique perspective, neither fully Dome nor fully adapted but consciously bridging both, had proven essential during this critical reconnection phase of human development after the collapse. Whether that liminality would remain his permanent contribution or eventually evolve toward greater integration with either community remained uncertain. But the principle guiding his path had crystallized through the experiences of the past year: service to human integration rather than division, expanding possibilities rather than restricting them, honoring both preservation and adaptation as legitimate responses to existential challenges. The Domes had preserved humanity through controlled environments when extinction threatened. Adaptation had expanded human possibilities when control became limitation. The future would require neither approach exclusively, but their thoughtful integration, preservation and expansion in balance rather than opposition. Not Eden restored, not the wasteland conquered, but something new emerging from their convergence. A humanity adapted not just biologically but philosophically to post-collapse reality in all its complexity and potential. Beyond the Dome, beyond isolation, beyond separation, the human journey continued, forever adapting to new horizons. Thank you for reading the final chapter of Beyond the Dome. I hope you've enjoyed Ash's journey from Dome Harvester to Transition Facilitator as humanity reconnects after generations of separation. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like and subscribe. What did you think of the ending? Which path would you have chosen? Dome structure, coalition adaptation, or the middle path Ash selected? Share your thoughts in the comments below.